We have got Sahil Bloom, someone who, if you're on Twitter, you've seen him write, you've seen his posts, you've seen his snippets of wisdom, and for many, many years, you've probably thought, why does this guy not have a book? Because he's so switched on. And we've all enjoyed those tweets that he's been putting out. And also you may subscribe to his newsletter, and you've probably thought, I'm surprised he doesn't have a book. So finally, I heard that he was putting his book out, and I went as quick as I could and said, oh, when you come to London, come and tell us about the book, and I'll, we'll bring some people together. And then, so no sooner does he arrive in London, having launched the book 5 minutes ago, and we just found out that it's already a Sunday Times bestseller, right? So isn't that just wild? Okay, so let's get Sahil up and let's please make him really welcome. Welcome to the stage, Sahil Bloom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good.
Hey everyone. I was hiding in the back.
You were hiding. Yeah, you had to do a reveal at the last.
I was
minute.
waiting for the fireworks.
We wanted to get you crouched under this little panel, but it wasn't going to work.
Bringing a cake that I can jump out of.
Yeah, Bon Jovi style, we thought. So, for the people who don't know the backstory of you and your story, give us 3 or 4 things that help us to understand who you are.
Sure. So first off, thank you everyone for taking the time to come out on Tuesday? I'm losing track of days. Tuesday evening?
I have no idea.
Tuesday evening. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm looking forward to meeting everyone after we're done. I guess the first thing that I would say to understand me is to know a little bit about my parents and where I come from. My mom was born and raised in Bangalore, India. My father is white Jewish from the Bronx, New York. And they crossed paths in a rather surprising turn of fate over the course of 2 weeks that they overlapped while my mom was starting a master's degree and my dad was finishing his PhD at Princeton in New Jersey. And my mom got up the courage to ask my dad out on a date.
She asked him out.
She asked him out. It's a funny story because they go out on this date, and my dad on this first date says to her, "My father will never accept us." And my mom was so blinded by his use of the word us that she completely missed the underlying message. And unfortunately, he was right. And his family was not accepting of this idea of their son meeting and dating, marrying an Indian woman, and his father told him that he had to choose between her or his family. And my dad walked out the door and never saw his family again.
Wow.
And to this day, I never met my dad's parents. He has 3 siblings I've never met. I have first cousins out there in the world somewhere that I never met. And that one decision that he made to choose love, to reject the common convention, the default path that was handed to him by his family, and to carve his own path against all odds, really set the course of my life and my sister's life, and created this sort of lineage of questioning some of these default assumptions that we've all been handed, these paths that we're supposed to walk down in life. And so I think that's a really important first step because it does wind its way to what I'm releasing now into the world with this book. The second thing I would say is that I spent the vast majority of my life marching down that exact default path that I feel like my father had rejected. I spent the first 30 years of my life doing all of the things that you are told will make you one day feel successful and happy and carefree, that you'll wake up one day and sort of live in that stress-free, fulfilled future that you've been promised if you achieve the things that the world tells you matter. Make money, acquire status, get promoted, have a fancy sounding job, all of those things that we're convinced from a young age are the things that are going to make us feel that way. I was doing those. And all along the way, I convinced myself that I was just one bonus, one promotion, one title, whatever the thing was, away from feeling that, waking up one day and feeling good about who I was as a person. And unfortunately, at every single one of those steps, other areas of my life were starting to fall apart. My relationships with my parents, I was never seeing them. We were living 3,000 miles away while I was chasing money and all of these other things. My relationship with my sister had effectively ground to a halt. My wife and I, unfortunately, were struggling to conceive at the time. That was creating strain in our relationship. I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. My physical and mental health were deteriorating. All of these other areas of my life were starting to suffer, while on the surface, it looked like I was winning the game.
You were working in investment banking.
I was working in private equity
at
the time.
So for anyone who's not worked in private equity, just give us like a little taste. What does working in private equity look like?
So private equity is basically just investing. You're buying and selling companies. And the lifestyle and the whole sort of status around it is that you work very, very hard and you make a whole lot of money. And it's supposed to be the trade-off that you feel good about because you're getting compensated for how hard you're working and the stress that you're taking on. And for some people, if you actually love it, if you truly get energy from investing and really enjoy it, it can be a great path. You can make money if you enjoy doing it. For me, it was entirely grounded in this idea that my happiness was conditional on making X, whatever X was. And as soon as I would get to X, it would be 3X or it would be 5X or whatever the next thing was. It was that idea of the arrival fallacy. You get to the thing and it just sort of is a mirage, goes off into the distance. And
just quickly, you were hitting those though, right?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that this wasn't like just far off into the distance. You're hitting these targets year after year after year and getting progressively better and more money, but still it wasn't landing for you.
Exactly. I mean, I was winning very much on the one scoreboard that we have for our lives, which is making money. And I was basically getting more and more narrowly focused on the one thing at the expense of all of these other things. And I was starting to see that the other things were showing cracks. And there were these issues starting to crop up in these other areas of my life that I was frankly just ignoring under the premise that they were all going to get solved if I just kept doing better and better on this one thing. And it all came to a head for me in a single inflection point in my journey, which was a conversation that I had with an old friend in May of 2021. It's the opening of the book, which you'll crack open and read. And that moment was, I went out for a drink, we sat down, and he asked how I was doing. And at first, I gave him the sort of standard response. I said, I'm good, busy. The thing that we all grow accustomed to saying when people ask how we're doing. You go to the cocktail party, you're like, I'm good, busy. It's sort of like a flex. You say it in a positive way. Like being more stressed is a good thing. It signals that we're important. And he kind of looked at me. He knows me better than that. He looked at me. And so I said, it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents, who were on the East Coast. We were living 3,000 miles away. I mentioned I was only seeing them at that point once a year. They were getting older. They were starting to show cracks in their health. And he asked how old they were. And I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them. And I said about once a year. And he said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. And I just remember feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I mean, the idea that the amount of time you have left with the people that you care about most in the world is that finite and countable, that you can put it onto a few hands, just shook me to the core. And in that moment, I realized that if something didn't change, if we didn't take an action, make a change, we were going to end up somewhere where we didn't want to be. So the next day I went home, my wife and I had a very candid conversation about what we wanted our center to be, what we wanted to ground ourselves in, what our true north really was. And within 45 days, we had taken that dramatic action. I had left this job that I had been at for 7 years, the good job. We had sold our house in California and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both sets of parents. And that action was the start of everything for me, because it was a reminder that you are in much more control of your time than you think. That number, 15, turned into the hundreds with a single action. I see my parents multiple times a month. They're a huge part of my son, their grandson's life now. This one tiny action that we took reminded us of the fact that we are actually in control of our time wealth, of our ability to create time, create moments with the people that we care about most.
Just quickly on this, for you to leave that job, my understanding of private equity, if you've been there for 7 years, if you walk away, you're walking away from quite a lot. Like, as in they get the hooks in because they've got carried interest and you've got part of the fund, but not if you walk away.
Yeah,
was it a hard decision?
Well, I was walking away from a lot, but I was walking into much more.
Mm-hmm. You know that now, but at the time?
That was why we made the decision in the first place, was that recognition that there was something that was missing while we chased the one thing. It was the recognition that money isn't nothing, it just can't be the only thing.
Yep.
And I had built my life around this one thing at the expense of everything else. And I started to recognize that there had to be a better way. There had to be a way to measure our lives around a much more comprehensive scoreboard, something that actually measured for the full war, if you will. There's this idea that I write about in the book of the Pyrrhic victory, the victory that comes at such a steep cost to the victor that it might as well have been a defeat. And that is a path that many people are walking down. You are walking down this path of winning the one battle, losing sight of the fact that you are going to lose the much bigger war. You may win that one battle, you may make a lot of money, and we know tons of people like that. We all do. Someone who's made $100 million, but they have 4 ex-wives and 5 children who don't talk to them. And you have to ask yourself, is that actually a war that I wanted to, is that actually a game that I wanted to win? If that's what it looked like, is that actually a battle that I cared to win? And that really is what this book is about. It is about redefining what a wealthy life looks like to you, figuring out what you actually care about so that you can go and take actions to build your life around those things. It's not about what I care about or what anyone else in this room tells you should care about. It's not about taking someone else's map and applying it to your terrain. It's about asking yourself the questions, wrestling with the questions so that you can decide for yourself, what is the life that I actually want to build, and what are the actions I need to take to go and walk towards that.
So you make this trade, financial wealth, and now you rediscover the first wealth in the book, which is time wealth. Tell us about time wealth.
Time wealth is fundamentally about that awareness, the awareness of time as your most precious asset. We kind of know that in the back of our heads, but then on a daily basis, we take a whole lot of actions that disregard the value of that time. Like if I were to ask anyone in this room, would you trade lives with Warren Buffett? He's worth $130 billion. He has access to anyone in the world. He reads and learns for a living. He flies around on Boeing business jets. But none of you would trade lives with him because he's 95 years old. There's no way you would agree to take all of his money, but take the amount of time that he has left. It's not a trade you would ever make. And similarly, on the flip side, he would do anything to be in your shoes and to have the amount of time that you have left. So we know in the back of our minds that time has this incalculable value. And yet on a daily basis, how much time do we spend comparing ourselves to others, worrying about stupid stuff, looking around us, scrolling on social media, doing all these things that are disregarding the value of your most precious asset and not leaning into the things that are creating energy, leaning away from things that are creating energy, leaning into people and things that are draining your energy on a daily basis. And so time wealth is really about fixing that.
So you've talked about time wealth in 2 ways there. You've talked about the amount of time we've got left. You've also talked about the amount of moments, because you, with your parents, you said I've got 15 moments with them at my current run rate. And then you recalculated the run rate. And it's like, oh, I've got hundreds and hundreds now. So how, in the book, how do you define time wealth? And how do we, what are the top 3 things we can do to start moving towards having more of it?
Yeah, I really think of time wealth as being built across 2, maybe 3 pillars. And the pillars are awareness, attention, and then control. So awareness is that understanding, the understanding that time is your most precious asset. It's an understanding of just how finite these moments are, the fact that you will never get that time back. Attention is about actually taking that awareness and then deploying your attention into the few things that really matter in your personal and professional life. All of you are rising through your career, progressing in your businesses, building things. You are at the point now where you need to start thinking about your attention as your most precious commodity. How can you actually deploy that finite attention into the few things that are really going to move the needle in your personal and professional life? And then finally, that is what actually unlocks control, which is the freedom. It's the freedom to choose where and when you are picking up different things in your life. It's saying no to the things that don't matter and yes to the things that do. The one tactic that I would say everyone should really go through in the week ahead to start to unlock this is to get a better sense of where your energy actually flows during the course of the week. The way that you do this is look at your calendar at the end of each day going forward. So let's say start on a Wednesday. At the end of your day tomorrow, color code your calendar according to whether each activity created energy, meaning you felt lifted up by it, you felt drawn to it, pulled in during or after, mark it green. If it was neutral, mark it yellow. Or if it drained your energy, you felt physically drained from it, mark it red. Do that for 3 to 5 days. Then zoom out and actually look at what you see on the calendar. Visually, what do you see? What are the trends and the types of activities that are creating energy in your world versus draining energy? If you can slowly make shifts over a period of time, over the next few months, to rebalance your calendar, to be more heavily green than red. You're never going to completely eliminate the red, but to have a higher ratio of green to red, you are going to experience better outcomes because your outcomes follow the energy that you actually have that you're deploying into these things. So think about doing that. It's a very simple 3 to 5 minute exercise at the end of each day to look at it, zoom out at the end of a few days, and get a better perspective on those trends.
So I know what some people are going to be thinking. They're going to say, okay, it's really cool to just quit your job and go and move to the other side and hang out with your parents. But what about actual, like, how did you actually like live? And what are some of the things that people can do? Because obviously people, it's not just purely and simply indulgent that they go chasing the money. There are bills to pay. There are those things. So like, give me some practicality about how do we make this shift from money over to a bit more time wealth? And also, is there anything that happens that you may not expect when you make that shift?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is I am very anti burn the boats on most things in life. You get a lot of advice of like, okay, if you decide you need to leave your job, just like quit and then go build the new thing. For about a year leading up to when I had the big revelation to switch, I had started writing on the internet. I had been stuck at home during COVID, had a bunch of time on my hands, and I had started writing originally on Twitter. And so by the time that moment hit, I had built a platform that was reaching, I don't know, roughly 100-ish thousand people on Twitter. I was about to start this newsletter. It was clear to me that there were people that were interested in my expertise as it related to building a platform. So there were the seeds of an idea that I could build a life outside of the thing that I was doing. That was important because that whole idea of the leap of faith, like when you're leaving the thing that you're currently on to go and build the life that you want on the other side, the way that I think that manifests for most people is you are standing where you are. You know exactly what your life looks like on this side. You have a whole lot of information and you have a whole lot of evidence that you can live where you currently are. The life that you want is on the other side of this enormous gap and expanse, and there's just this nothingness below you. You have no information and no evidence about your ability to live on the other side of that. So there's this huge asymmetry that manifests as this fear, this huge gap in between you. So it feels like this huge leap of faith that you're gonna have to jump over this. Your goal, as you think about taking that leap of faith, is to gather information and to create little bits of evidence that close that asymmetry, that actually fundamentally shrink that enormous gap that you have to the point where it feels less like an enormous leap of faith and more like stepping over a little gap. That is really what I did during that year without knowing it, frankly. Now I kind of have a way of thinking about that, but without knowing it, I was gathering a whole lot of information by actually doing things, and I was creating evidence. I was actually building something that told me that there was a life that I could actually live on the other side of that. We can all do that. You can be working in a job that you don't like and carve out 30 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day to gather little bits of information, to create little bits of evidence, to build the scorecard, to get your first customer for something, to create a landing page. You can do those little things that are fundamentally creating that micro evidence that you can actually build a life on the other side in a place that you want to live.
I like that you dropped the brand in. That was excellent. That was.
I'll receive payment for that later.
That's what we discussed in advance. So you can build the scorecard first. And actually, the truth is you can like launch a waiting list and get people filling it in and start doing that. You built an audience. You know, a lot of the times when we talk with startups, for example, we say concept, audience, offer, sales. So come up with an idea, test it with an audience, but don't try and sell the audience anything. Just see if you can build an audience. So what I'm hearing from you, you tested your ideas with an audience. And I mean, I remember you blowing up during that time where you kind of like, so who's this guy? Sahil, he's everywhere. And like suddenly you end up with 100,000 followers.
Yeah, the one thing I would say though is like, I didn't know that that was a business. So I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. And I really mean that. Like my dad is a tenured professor. I didn't grow up starting tinkering with things, building businesses. I was playing baseball. Like I played sports. I had all of my friends that are entrepreneurs now, I ask them about their background and they're like, well, when I was 8 years old, I started this business and then I took it national. And I'm like, oh, when I was 12, I started a lemonade stand and then we're the biggest lemonade business in the state. I'm like, what? I was like dicking around playing baseball in all seriousness. And I really didn't know anything about starting a business I just really enjoyed writing. I just, like, every time I would do it, I would feel pulled into it. So when I talk about energy, that's what I mean. I really believe that your outcomes follow your energy. When you feel pulled towards something, when you feel that feeling of interest, true interest in some work, you are going to show your best outcomes. It's the same with people, by the way. The people that you feel pulled towards, that create energy in your life, end up being the best relationships. The ones who make you feel physically drained are probably relationships that you want to lean away from, whether that's a family member or a friend or whoever that is. And so I really want to caution against saying that, like, I had some grand strategy to any of this that I was doing when I was writing. There was no part of me that thought that I would leave working in private equity to go write threads on Twitter. I mean, I have an Indian mother. Like, I think I would get excommunicated, right? Like, my mom still asks me if I want to be a doctor. Like, now that I've published a book, my mom is kind of off my case. She's actually here in London right now.
And so you're in the Royal Society of Medicine.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe this is the start. But that was not something that was on my radar.
Tell us about this photo.
I mean, this is a very good representation of exactly why we moved across the country. This is a photo of my wife, my son, and I with both sets of grandparents, with my wife's parents and my parents. And it's a special photo because it's a representation of one fact, which is no job will ever pay you enough to live far from people you love. You could not pay me any amount of money to move to Omaha, Nebraska for work because I don't know anyone there. And that is fundamentally about the scorecard. And it's about changing the way that you measure what matters to you in your life. You could offer me $100 million to go move to Omaha, Nebraska, and I genuinely would not do that because I value my social wealth, this idea that I get to spend so much time with the people that I care about, way more highly at this point in my life than I do incremental financial wealth. It's my personal definition of what a wealthy life looks like is my ability to do this on any given Tuesday. And if I can do that, I am living my version of a wealthy life. I feel like the wealthiest man alive. And I'm never gonna make $1 billion. I'm perfectly fine with that. It's not something that I really care about. There's people in the room who probably wanna make $1 billion. I think that's great. If you're grounded in your purpose and you wanna go build something meaningful that impacts 100 million lives and it's going to create an enormous amount of jobs and go make you a whole ton of financial wealth, I think that's fantastic. As long as it's grounded in your purpose, not in the pursuit of an incremental dollar and in the chase for more and more money. If it's grounded in the chase for more purpose, more something of substance, I think that's fantastic, and I think you can build an amazing life around that. But we can't just keep chasing more money and thinking that's not going to deteriorate these other areas of our life.
I think your son has really good hair wealth.
He does.
I
wonder where he got that from.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. All right, let's talk about social wealth. You began to talk about social wealth here. What is social wealth? How do you evaluate social wealth? What are the 3 things that we can do to increase social wealth?
Social wealth is all about your relationships. It's about your depth of connection to a few people and then your looser connections to broader networks, things that kind of extend beyond the self. And social wealth is fundamentally built through a mindset shift. And that mindset shift is to recognize that investments in relationships are arguably the best investments you can make. But we don't think about investing in relationships the same way that we think about investing in financial assets. You know that putting $50 into an index fund today is a good move for your financial future because it's going to compound and grow over the course of your life. And that $50 is better than 0 today. The exact same rule applies to your relationships. Putting that tiny deposit, that tiny investment in your relationships today is better than nothing. So sending the text to the friend when you're thinking about them, getting that 15-minute coffee date with the person that you were otherwise going to skip, being the one to be the catalyst for that weekend trip with old friends that is so easy to let slip once you're done with university, getting the walk with your parents or with your sibling, those tiny investments that are so easy to forget about as our lives get busy, compound positively into your future. Anything above 0 compounds. But if we forget to do those things, if we keep using the word later, we end up regretting it because those areas atrophy. And later, as a word, I think of as the most dangerous word in the dictionary. You say, I'll spend more time with my kids later. I'll spend more time with my partner, with my friends later. I'll invest in those relationships later. And the sad thing is that later just becomes another word for never. Because those things are not going to exist in the same way later. Your kids are not going to be 5 years old later. Your partner, your friends are not going to be there for you later if you're not there for them now. So either we design a way to invest in those things in some tiny way on a daily basis now, or we're going to end up regretting it later.
Tell us about, you talk about social wealth. Tell us about this this picture.
This is a photo with Tim Cook, who has been a mentor and great friend of mine for the last 10 or so years. And this is, I mean, it's a representation of the value of, I would say, a couple things. One, building what I would think of as a personal board of advisors. You know,
Can we just slow down a second?
Yeah.
Everyone's sitting there going, but how are you friends with Tim Cook?
Yeah.
Like, we're all sold on the idea of being friends with Tim Cook. That's fine, right? When you're saying...
He wasn't really
Just
Tim
one
Cook
of-
when I first met him,
One
to
of
be
my
fair.
tips is just to have friends like Tim Cook.
Yeah. Just do it.
You know,
I
if you
don't
really
get it.
want to
Just
improve
do
your
it.
social wealth.
I don't get why no one does this.
Yeah, why does no one just go and hang out with Tim more often?
So there's a couple things I'll say.
Around this.
I met Tim in 2014. I had just started working. I graduated college in 2014, and I was starting my first job. And I knew that if I was going to get to the office at the time I wanted to, I was going to have to go to the gym really early if I wanted to keep up my fitness habit. And that meant getting to the gym at 4:45 in the morning every single day. And it turns out that not that many people are willing to do that. And there was a group of about 5 of us who would show up at the gym every single day at 4:45. Tim was one of those 5 people. And for the first 6 months that I was doing this, I had no idea who he was. He was the new-ish CEO of Apple at the time. I think he had been only CEO for about a year. There was tons of questions about whether he was going to be like an interim, thing post Steve Jobs.
You genuinely had no idea?
No, I wasn't in tech. I had no, there was just no, he also wasn't nearly as prominent of a figure as he is now.
When you turned up and you're there 4:45, he's there at 4:45, and he says, "Good morning." That didn't.
There wasn't much of that.
No, okay, fair
There wasn't much of that. And he didn't, at the time, he had no security. It was just another guy pulling up in his car and going into the gym. And, another one of the fitness people that there was 5 of us. And I'd talk to him every single day. And 6 months in, someone came up to me after I just talked to him and was like, "Do you know who that is that you were just talking to?" I don't know. That's the guy that I talked to. And they were like, "That's Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple." And I just remember saying, "Oh, shit. What have I been saying to this guy for the last 6 months?" Racking my brain of all the dumb things that I've probably said. And then once I understood, I asked him whether he'd be willing to get a breakfast or coffee and provide some guidance on career things, because I was just starting out in my career. We had built a rapport. We'd been talking basically every morning for 6 months. And importantly, I had never asked him for anything. So for 6 months, I had just gotten to know a human, and I was probably one of the only, in hindsight, I was probably one of the only people that he had encountered in that whole period of time who had been so oblivious as to who he was that I hadn't asked for anything. So I built this genuine relationship without having any sort of weird pretenses that I think for people in that standing, it's very hard to find someone who's not just looking for something immediately. Everyone you encounter ends up coming with a handout, looking for something. "I'll raise money for my startup. Can you invest?" Or "I want a job at Apple," or whatever the thing was.
You sound really noble, but you just didn't know who he was.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was. Yeah, no, and honestly, it was. I've told him this. It was probably a blessing, because I probably would have done something stupid. I wasn't looking for a job at Apple, and frankly, what I care about most when it comes to, I've probably, in 10 years that I've known him, I've maybe asked about Apple 3 to 5 times total.
So what have you learned from this experience of maintaining a long-term friendship with someone like Tim Cook?
Finding simple ways to add value to someone's life is something that I've always held in a very high importance around. And the important reframe there is when you meet someone, especially when you're young in your career, you're early on, that is way, way above you, is to think, how could I ever add value to this person? You just say well, I was an analyst at a private equity, what am I gonna do to add value to the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world? But you'd be surprised the different ways that you can just add tiny amounts of value to someone's life. One of the first times I sent him an email, it was that I had seen an article that he was cited in talking about something, and I thought that the way that he had articulated something in particular was was well done. And so I mentioned it to him in the gym, and he said like, oh, I haven't seen that article yet. Thank you for letting me know. I'll check it out. And I just followed up and sent him the article. And it was like this tiny little simple thing that created a little touch point that we could then build off of, that he would then respond to the email, that there was an interaction around it. And you can find things like that with literally anyone. I mean, if you're interacting with a senior person that's much, much older than you, they don't have the same perspective on how younger people are interacting with technology as you do. You have a unique lens that is very different than theirs on the world, and you can provide that. That is a form of providing value to someone that's in a different standing in life than you. But the entire reframe then is based on you having the confidence that you can add value to this person's life in some way. That you're not useless to them just because you're younger or just because you don't have some high-sounding role. That you can do that, and it can be a mutually beneficial relationship in that way.
I'm curious, when you think about time freedom or time wealth, does Tim Cook have time wealth?
Yeah, I would say yes, in the sense that he can pretty much control what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. The flip side of that is he definitely has the strictest schedule that I've ever met of anyone. He still wakes up at 3:45 in the morning every single day. He still goes to the gym ultra early. He's constantly traveling, constantly doing things, but it's on his own volition. It's because he absolutely loves it, and he has some of the highest mental wealth score that I can imagine. I mean, I've never met someone who's so centered on his singular purpose in life of building this company and on continuing to build on the things that Steve had created.
It's interesting though that, like, yes, he can do anything he wants in theory, but it'd be very hard to take 6 weeks off.
Yeah, but through his own decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of the point here, is like, if you choose to do that, then that is still time wealth. Just because you're choosing to have no time doesn't mean you don't have time wealth. You're making a decision that you are going to invest your time into something you really care about. Yeah, it's the awareness.
Okay, let's have a look at a different photo. This one, everyone's tweeting this photo, or everyone's sharing this photo on social media from the book. Time spent with children, and it peaks and then it just drops off. Where did you find this data?
This is from the American Time Use Survey. So it's a data set that maps how we spend our time and who we spend our time with over the course of our lives. And it's averaged across the entire data set. So when people ask questions about like, oh, what ages? Well, it's an average, so the way that you're looking at it. The point is that there is sort of this magic window of time, this window that is much shorter than we care to admit, during which certain people, this one's for children, occupy our lives. And that idea has actually been understood throughout history. I talk about in the book this idea that the ancient Greeks had two words for time. They had chronos, which was quantitative, kind of linear time from time A to time B. And then they had kairos, which was the idea that not all time is created equal, that there are certain moments or certain windows that actually have higher importance, more weight, more texture. And that's really what you're looking at when you look at these charts. It's to say that there are certain windows of time during which certain people occupy your world, and that energy and attention deployed into those windows is more impactful than it is during other periods of time.
Amazing. Let's talk about mental wealth. So how do we measure mental wealth? Who is an example that you think of for mental wealth? What do you think of when you imagine someone who gets it all except for mental wealth?
Yeah. I really think of mental wealth as being about purpose, being about growth, and being about the ability to create space in your life. When I talk about space, what I mean is the space that exists between all of the stimulus that you experience in your life, all of the things that are coming in, the emails, the social media notifications, the texts, and then your responses, the things that are going out, the things that you're having to actually go and do and process. And Viktor Frankl talks about the fact that our power as humans exists in the space that we can create between those two, because in that space is our power to actually choose our response. Most of us live in a sort of perpetual loop of stimulus and response. We actually don't create that space in our life. And it is so powerful when you're able to create it, because it allows you to zoom out and see the bigger picture in your life, to actually ask some of these questions, to wrestle with some of the bigger picture things that we've previously ignored, and to lean into your curiosity, the things that you're getting excited about, to lean into the energy where you feel pulled. When I think of mental wealth, I have one specific image in mind, and it is this 99-year-old man, actually he's 100 now, who I grew up with, named Hank Bihar. And on his 90th birthday, Hank was asked what he wanted for his birthday. And his wife asked him, and she expected him to say like a vacation or nice dinner or something like that. And he told her that he wanted to spend a day at Harvard. He had his entire life had this dream of understanding what the kind of brainiacs at Harvard are doing. He hadn't gone to college, and he wanted to experience that. So my dad actually arranged for this to happen, for him to go and sit in on a few classes at Harvard. So this 90-year-old man showed up and went to like an astronomy 101 course at Harvard and sat in the front row and took notes and asked questions and just engaged in his curiosity just for the sake of learning. There is no possible utility. There's no astronomy side hustle that this 90-year-old man was about to start. There's no scorecard for his, astronomy, whatever quiz, whatever he was gonna do. He just wanted to learn. And Hank, to this day, wakes up every single day, does the New York Times crossword puzzle. He's whip smart as an 100-year-old. Unbelievable. And that to me is what mental wealth is about. It's about engaging your curiosity to actually find and uncover this growth, to uncover your purpose in life, that higher order connection, and to create the space necessary to actually do that.
So to help us understand that, tell us about someone who's got all the other kinds of wealth, but they're lacking this one. Who do you think of who's...
I don't know if I think of a specific person. The archetype of that person is the person who is utterly miserable in the thing they're doing, but they are trapped in it because of the success that they have with it. I have plenty of friends like that. Well, one of my friends is a senior executive C-suite at a large public company, makes probably $10 million a year. His lifestyle has inflated to the point where they're basically spending that per year. And he has more money than I could ever know what to do with, but he can't leave the job. And he wants to badly. Like, he is miserable at this job, and he can't leave because he is terrified of what'll happen if that paycheck goes to zero, that he doesn't have that connection. So every single day, he's in his 40s, like he has 30, 40 years of engaging and working on something, and he has no ability or no freedom to actually step off that and engage in what really calls him, in the things that really call him. And that, to me, is terrifying. And we know actually scientifically that it leads to a shorter life. Engaging your purpose, feeling a connection to a purpose, something that is truly yours, your sacred duty as it's called in ancient Hindu texts, is life-giving. It actually, people that engage their purpose live longer. It reduces all-cause mortality. Feeling like you actually understand what you're doing on a daily basis, that you feel connected to that thing. And it doesn't have to be your work. You can engage in your purpose in some totally different way. You may need to connect to it while you are at work, but it doesn't have to be your work. I spent time with a factory worker during my research for this book, puts together widgets for 8-10 hours a day, like on an assembly line over and over again. Doesn't like his job, but every single day when he goes to work, he connects to his higher order purpose, which is to be the father that he never had, to be a provider for his boys, for his sons. So every day when he goes to work doing something he doesn't love, he connects it to the higher order thing that he does love, his ability to be that provider, to be that father to his sons. And every day he gets energy as a result when he shows up to go and do those things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that that purpose is your work, but you need to be able to connect to your purpose while you are doing your work.
You mentioned a Hindu concept, and then this photo I wanted to bring up. Tell us about this photo.
This is a photo of my late grandmother, passed away last year. She was an amazing woman, also whip smart to the age of 95 when she passed away, beating the hell out of my Harvard professor father and myself in Scrabble right up until the end. This relates to social wealth and mental wealth. My grandfather passed away in 2005, and India is an amazing culture in that people really take care of each other after a loss like that. In America, you maybe for a month have people come and visiting you and bringing you food and taking care of you. In India, just never stopped. I mean, for 15 years, every single day, someone came and called on my grandmother, brought her food, hung out with her, took her to different events. She was in a Scrabble club. She was doing all of these things every single day, engaging that social wealth, that connection. And it was life-giving. It is scientifically life-giving for us. It is the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 is your relationship satisfaction at age 50. It's the single greatest predictor of how you actually age, how well you age. And my grandmother experienced that. And then COVID hit, and she was locked down, unable to see anyone. And in the span of 18 months, she aged more than she had in the 15 years prior to that. It literally killed her. We went and saw her shortly before she passed away, and when we got there, she was nearly catatonic. after 18 months before, perfectly healthy. Everything was fine. And within a few hours of being there, it was like it breathed new life into her that we were there. She was up and about, she was thinking clearly again, but it was just a really clear, visceral example of that fact, that connection to other humans, that engagement, that connection is truly life-giving for us. And when taken away from us, you start to see that deterioration quickly.
All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about physical wealth. So what are the biggest pillars? What's the impact of getting it wrong? And what do people struggle with most around this?
Physical wealth is a funny one in the modern era because you are bombarded by information that tells you that you have to follow the like new, sexy, complex regimen in order to be healthy. We're all familiar now probably with Brian Johnson, this guy that's spending $2 million to try to live forever per year. He's doing all sorts of wacky things like injecting his penis. He's all over the map, and like publicizing all of this stuff, doing all of these crazy things. I've spent a lot of time with Brian actually in the research for this book. He's a great guy. He's quirky to say the least. But that idea that physical wealth is grounded in this crazy complicated set of regimens that you have to spend all this money on is dangerous because it convinces someone that is just starting out that that is what the standard is to be healthy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That might be level 100 of this video game, but the reality is that level 1 gets you 80 or 90% of the benefit, and it's basically free. You basically have to follow these 3 pillars. Movement, just move your body for 30 minutes a day. I don't care if it's like walking, biking, hiking, dancing, whatever you like doing, move your body for 30 minutes a day. Nutrition, eat whole unprocessed foods at 80% of your meals, 17 out of 21 meals during the week. And then recovery, sleep 7 hours a night. If you do those 3 things, you don't need the fanciest regimen that people are trying to sell you on social media, all of the like ebooks and courses or all of these things that exist out there that people are trying to sell you. Yeah, no penis injections required, fortunately, for all the men out there. You just need to do the simple, boring basics. If you invest in those as a starting point, you can get this engine moving. And again, it's that same rule that we talked about earlier. Anything above 0 compounds. So ambitious people, which I would guess every single person in this room would identify as, because you wouldn't be here on a Tuesday night if you weren't, we are the worst at allowing optimal to get in the way of beneficial. So if you don't have an hour to work out, well, I'm just not gonna work out because I don't have the full hour to do it. I don't have, an hour to spend with my partner, so we might as well just keep working. I don't have 2 hours for deep work, so I'm just not gonna work on this thing today. But we're letting optimal get in the way of beneficial every single time we do that. And in physical wealth, that happens all the time. Doing a 15-minute walk is better than doing nothing. If all hell breaks loose, if your kid keeps you up at night, if you don't have any energy, you can still do some tiny thing. You can go for a 5-minute walk around the block. You can go for that 10-minute jog. It's better than doing nothing. Anything above 0 compounds in this area.
You've got an interesting rule around your physical standard that you've got for yourself. What's your standard? What's your rule?
I have something that I call my ABC system that I think is really helpful for people to think about. And it applies to all of these areas. I think physical wealth is a good place to start around it, which is to say, with any given kind of habit or system that you're trying to build into your life, set an A goal, a B goal, and a C goal for a daily basis. So the A goal is the optimal case. It's when you feel great, when you're well rested, when everything's going well in your day. Let's say I'm gonna try to go to the gym for an hour. My B goal, maybe 30 minutes. I'm gonna do 30 minutes of activity. And then my C goal is kind of the minimum viable level, like just doing something, 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk, whatever the thing is. So on days when I feel great, I'll hit the A goal. I feel awesome, I slept well, my kids didn't wake me up, all of the things went well, I'm gonna go to the gym for an hour. The B goal is kind of what you go and do if you just feel okay, if things are just going generally according to plan. I'm gonna go get the 30 minutes in. And when all hell breaks loose, I have a C goal to fall back on. I'm just gonna do something because anything above 0 compounds. That system is really useful for these different areas of your life because it forces you to recognize that you can do something, that something is better than nothing in all of these places, and that you don't need to feel intimidated by the optimal level on a daily basis. You can fall back to these lower goals that will still keep the ball moving forward in these areas.
You've also said you've got this standard around you want to live your life at a level that is unreasonable or high relative to your age.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to feel healthy and vital relative to my age. That's kind of my my general rule of thumb for physical wealth is like, I want to feel good relative to my age. I don't feel the same now as I did when I was 22. Like, you know, drinking a glass of wine nowadays, I feel it the next day. I definitely didn't when I was 22. I was totally fine. I could have probably several drinks and feel totally okay. And so what we're trying to do with physical wealth is invest on a daily basis to fight against the natural decay and atrophy that is going to happen. And the alternative is doing nothing, and it happens much, much faster, but we can fight against that and sort of delay that curve over long periods of time. And again, it doesn't take a whole lot to get the basics, to get the 80-90% of the value in this domain.
But when I heard you say this, you talked about this idea that you have to pick something that's hard relative to your age, and then you've got to engage in something that relative to your age is hard to do. And the most recent one was this photo, right? It's hard to do, which is take this photo. It's very hard for me to do.
You're grabbing YouTube thumbnails?
Yeah. So this is you completing a marathon.
Yes, this was 2024 Erie Marathon that I ran in September. I mean, that idea of doing hard things is an important concept for life. I am a firm believer that physical wealth is a good domain to do this in, and fundamentally doing hard things. It is about taking on voluntary struggle. Because when you engage in voluntary struggle, you are better prepared for the involuntary struggle that inevitably comes into your life in other arenas. When you engage in that voluntary stress that you're putting yourself under, you're better prepared for the involuntary stress that comes.
So just to show that you walk your talk on this incredibly, the story I heard about the backstory of this is that you've got a young son and you want to start training for a marathon, which is quite a self-indulgent, time-consuming thing, and then you make a deal with your wife that is, all right, I'm going to do this in a way that's not so self-indulgent. Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, I actually posted it on social media that I was running this marathon, and I got home one day and my wife was like, "Oh, so you're running a marathon?" And she kind of had that look on her face, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do it."
Subscribe to my
I was
Twitter?
like, "Oh, I'm going to do it," and she was like, "Oh, we didn't talk about this," and I was like, "Okay, look, I'll make you a deal. It will never interfere with our family time. And in particular, that's like our weekends. We really like take seriously that we spend all our weekends together and that we're sort of unplugged in that way. And that means that by the time my son wakes up on Saturday, I need to be done with my run. And for anyone that's run a marathon or done any training around it, Saturday is usually the day when you do like your longest run of the week, just because of work reasons. And so what that meant was that during the summer, when I was kind of in peak training for this is like July and into August, I was going out for a 20 or 22 mile run that I had to be done with by 7:30 in the morning when my son woke up. So I was getting up at 3:45 in the morning on a Saturday, eating a full meal, and then starting these runs at like 4:30 in order to get home by 7:30. And to me, it was just a reminder and an example that it's very easy to blame time or energy when in reality, it's just our desire. But when it comes to doing something that you say that you want to do to change your life, then we say, oh, we can't do it. We're tired. We don't have the time. We can't wake up early in the morning and do those things. And it's fundamentally about desire at that point. You just need to decide if you want the thing enough, if you actually want to do it. And I had made up my mind that I really wanted to do this thing for whatever reason. It was kind of silly, but I'd made up my mind that I wanted to do it. And so I did.
Amazing. Let's come around full circle back to where it began, which was the financial wealth, right? So you started with financial wealth and then you missed out on all these other types of wealth. And now you needed to slot it back in. So tell us about what are your biggest learnings around financial wealth, and in particular, how it slots into a more balanced situation that you strive for.
Financial wealth, as I talk about it in the book, the nuance here is fundamentally about understanding your definition of enough, what it means to have enough financially to you, and really not what the number is, but what that life looks like to you. And that's an important distinction because numbers are very prone to the mirage thing where they disappear and they go to 2 to 3x, whatever it was. Actually, there's a study around this. Michael Norton, this Harvard Business School professor, went and asked a bunch of people worth anywhere from $1 million on through 100 million plus, how happy they were on a scale of 1 to 10. Then he asked, how much more money would you need in order to be at a 10? And everyone across the board, whether they were worth $1 million or 100 million, said they needed 2 to 3 times as much in order to be at a 10. It makes no sense. But humans are very good at doing that thing where the number disappears and it just gets bigger. It's much more difficult to do that with an actual life. A real vision of what that life looks like that you are living, that life of enough. And there's a story that brings this to life perfectly that I talk about in the book. Some of you may have heard in the past. It's a beautiful parable of an investment banker and a fisherman. This investment banker goes down to this Mexican fishing village and he's walking along the docks and he comes across this boat with a few fish in it. And he asks the fisherman, "How long did it take you to catch those fish?" The fisherman says, "Only a little while." And the banker's confused. He says, "Why didn't you fish for longer?" And the fisherman says, "Well, I have everything I need. In the morning, I fish for a little while, and then I go home and have lunch with my wife, and then in the evening, I go into town, I play music and laugh with my friends." And the banker's like, "You got this all wrong. Here's what you have to do. You got to fish for longer so you can catch more fish. Then you use that money to buy a second boat. Then they fish. You use that money to buy a third boat, a fourth boat, a fifth boat. You create an enormous fishing enterprise. You move to the big city. You take the company public, and you're going to make millions." And the fisherman looks at him and says, "And then what?" And the banker says, "And then what? Then you can retire to a small fishing town. You can fish for a little while in the morning, then you can have lunch with your wife, and then in the evening you can go into town and play music and laugh with your friends." And the fisherman just smiles and walks away. And the story, the way it's commonly interpreted, is that the banker is wrong and the fisherman is right. Now, I actually think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's fundamentally about the fact that they have a completely different view on what it means to build your life of enough, what a good life looks like. The banker's map does not match the fisherman's terrain. The fisherman is already living his enough life. The banker may find value and purpose around building something big. That may be his purpose, to create a bunch of jobs, to go and build this big enterprise, to do these things. That may be what energizes him, but it's not what the fisherman wants out of his life. And so to apply someone else's map to your terrain is dangerous. What that is what we do when we accept the mountain that we're told that we should want to climb. We get so obsessed with speed in our lives, of running faster and faster, that we never take a second to ask ourselves whether this is actually a mountain that we care to be on. We've just taken it, we've accepted it from whoever handed it to us along the way, but we've never taken a second to ask that question. Is this actually a mountain that I want to climb? And the recognition there is that we all need to focus much more on direction than speed in our lives, because it's much better to climb slowly up the right mountain than it is to climb fast up the wrong one.
When you started looking at people and their relationship with money, what surprised you?
I'd say the number one thing that I kept seeing over and over again was people that were rich yet miserable. And it is the most shocking thing to someone who has yet to acquire a level of financial wealth to recognize that archetype of the person who has accumulated so much financial wealth but is truly fundamentally unhappy is so much more common than you realize. And it happens because you are focusing on the one thing at the expense of everything else. The way that you measure yourself matters. Peter Drucker said that. What gets measured gets managed. That is a statement to say that the thing that we can measure ends up being the thing that we focus on. It's the thing that we myopically hone in on and try to optimize around. And so with money as the scoreboard, you are prone to doing that. You will hone in on and optimize around that one thing and totally lose sight of the impact it has on everything else. I did that. I've experienced that. I've been there. I saw all these other areas of my life starting to show cracks and deteriorate because I got so narrowly honed in on the one thing. So that's really what the whole book is about. It's creating this new scoreboard so that you can measure yourself along the things that actually lead to a fulfilling life, that are actually going to build this life of true wealth across these different pillars, not just the one. It's so that you can win the battle, make money, do well in that one domain, but also win the war along the way.
Well, when you're chasing money now, because everyone has to do that to an extent, what are the most high impact things you're focused on?
I fundamentally believe that the money that I earn in my life is going to be a byproduct of the ripples that I can create in the world. And what I mean by that is I believe that I'm in the business of creating positive ripples, like putting out ideas that spark other people to take actions in their lives. That is a ripple. Like this book is a stone that I throw into the pond, and I can do everything that I can possibly imagine to make that first splash as big as possible. That's the launch. But after that, It's up to the world. Like, that is the ripples that then have to be created from people actually going and taking actions on these things, these ideas that I share, sharing it with other people, creating these ripples. I think I will get paid on the basis of the number and strength of the ripples that I can create with the things that I put out. And that means that my central focus is on the quality of those stones that I'm sort of throwing across all of this. And I've lost sight of that at times. I've chased a whole bunch of different like random business things, and I've had to pull back from some of those along the way because I realized that they actually aren't in line with the main thing. Like, I think it was Stephen Covey that said the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. And I need to, and I'm on this continuous journey of getting better about that, of focusing in on the things where I feel like I might be the best in the world at this, and I'm going to keep doing this over and over again.
Now, you get involved in starting a whole bunch of companies and funding a bunch of companies. Tell us about what you actually do. Like, so these are some of your holdings.
Yeah.
And you've also got another ventures portfolio, your holdings portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So like, when you add a lot of value, what is it you're doing?
So my kind of business ecosystem, I have the media company, which is the book, any of my newsletter, any of these other sort of media related things that I'm doing, which is increasingly 90+% of my actual energy. The things that I'm putting my energy into are things where I am creating content, sharing ideas with the world to create those ripples. I then have sort of a business portfolio, which is this holding company that has a bunch of significant minority stakes in cash flowing companies. And then I have a venture fund that I raised in 2022, which is mostly fully deployed now. So I'll need to decide if I raise another one, which is small investments, small percentage ownership stakes in 50+ early stage technology companies. That, I would say, the venture fund is much more a byproduct of the network that I have, that I get access to these deals. I have very little involvement with any of those companies. Occasionally there's things where I can actually help them with some storytelling or something that's going on, but it's like a 1% allocation of my time. My involvement with holding companies, generally speaking, is to drive leads and strategy. So these are all businesses that I use as an actual customer. And my whole thesis was anything that was on my P&L, like these sort of cost centers in my business, were things that I could turn into profit centers by partnering with someone to actually go and build a business that offers that thing. So Paperboy is a good example of this. I had an entire team running the back end of my newsletter. I write my newsletter every week. I don't want to deal with anything other than the writing part of it. I love writing. I don't want to deal with ads, lead magnets, growth funnels, segmentation, all of those things that exist to run a newsletter really well. I'm terrible at that. I don't want to do it. So I built a team to go and do that. And then we launched it as a business. And now that business does that for some of the biggest newsletter creators in the world, a bunch of people that you would know that were under NDA that we can't talk about. And that's an amazing example of one where I don't really need to do much to drive really high LTV leads into that business. Because anytime someone asks me how I grow my newsletter, like, well, here's the team that's doing it. Here's what it is. And it's highly retentive business. It's like a $10,000 a month client. You make a whole lot of money off of not a whole lot of leads coming into that business. So that was really the thesis with these more significant kind of ownership holding companies. My time involvement, again, is very, very low because the CEOs of all of these own over 50%. So they are empowered to make all of the decisions, hire and fire people, growth strategy, all of these things. My involvement is sort of like on a monthly strategy or quarterly board level.
Cool. Very cool. All right, let's talk about the future. You've written the book. The book is out. It's a bestseller. What do you hope happens?
I really am focused on going deeper on these ideas in the world. I didn't write a book to just write a book. I think a lot of influencers, quote unquote, when they write a book, it's sort of part of a business ecosystem. Like they're doing it as a lead magnet for a seminar or for a funnel. Oh, sorry.
Hate those people. Yeah.
That was not a subtweet, by the way. That was not a subtweet.
That was us.
Yeah. That was not a subtweet at all. I was like looking around, why is everyone laughing? No, but I think that is like a common thing. It's not a knock on it. I think it's a great way of doing it for a lot of people. It's not, yeah. It is not, yeah. I don't have the business ecosystem that would make sense for. Actually, you and I, at our last dinner, we talked about this. You asked me this exact question, like, what's the business ecosystem? And my honest answer is there isn't one that underlies this. The idea is the idea. I want to go out in the world and go deeper on this idea with people. If I'd wanted to make a ton of money, if that was my goal in life, I genuinely would have just stayed in private equity. Like, that was the highest possible likelihood of me making a whole lot of money in my life, would have just been to stay. Or if I really cared about it now, I'd go back and do that same thing. I still have the same skills. I could go back and do that. That's just not what I value or what I want to do. I think I will make enough money. I have plenty to do the things that my wife and I and my family and my son and hopefully future children that we want to do, take care of my parents hopefully someday. All of those things, I'm fine. And so my main focus is on feeling like I'm creating an impact in the world. And that is what I'm so excited about with this book. And it's why I'm so excited about this first week since we've launched it, because I can start to see that people are taking the ideas and just starting to ask those little questions about their lives that they previously weren't. Starting to confront those tiny little things that we've been avoiding. And I fundamentally believe that the answers that we seek in life are found in the questions that we avoid. There are all of these questions that we're avoiding asking in our own lives, because it's easier and it's more comfortable to just not ask them and to just continue to go about the way that we have. And this book really forces you to stop and pause and ask some of those questions. And if that causes you to do one tiny thing differently in your life and that creates a positive impact, I am going to be over the moon with what this can go and do in the world. And so I really want to spend more time with people going deeper on that idea and more in person. I like posting things on the internet is great. I don't really like social media. I do it because I think it's a part of what I have to do, but I really want to spend more time out in the world, speaking, actually getting to meet people and see the impact that I can create.
Now that it's out, is there anything you felt you left out of the book? Is there any idea that you thought?
No, we'll save it for a second book.
Save it for a second book, nice. And 3 years from now, the book makes a ripple and you hear about that. What would you like to be celebrating 3 years from now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Celebrating 3 years from now. I guess professionally, everyone celebrates these like early bestseller wins. And don't get me wrong, I love something like that because there was so much hard work from myself and the team that went into this. But the idea of it continuing to be something that sells 3 years from now is really how I view success, because that means that it's actually impacting people and that they're continuing to share it with each other because they got value from the ideas. So I'd love to be celebrating that in 2020.
Maybe a bit of a movement of people doing their five types of wealth. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Let's hear some questions from the audience. Go for it.
Have you achieved 5 forms of wealth?
Have you got
Have I
5?
achieved it? Yes, I am way better than I was. So you can take this quiz in the book, or there's an online version at wealthscorequiz.com, which will give you a good visual of kind of your baseline. And when I first did that, when I first created it in 2021, I think my score was a 51. Now, the most recent time my wife and I did it together, I was at an 87. So have made a lot of progress. But the point, which I get across in the book as well, is that none of this is about an end state. It's actually fighting against that end state mentality that we all have, because I've been there, like chasing the end state of like, okay, I've achieved it. This is enlightenment. I've gotten to the thing. Thriving is very much a continuous journey. And so the point is, these things are going to change across the different seasons of your life. Like what you are prioritizing or focusing on during any one season will change. If you're young and you're in your 20s and 30s, you're probably going to be prioritizing building financial wealth. And these other areas are going to be lower on the dimmer switch. You're going to kind of turn them down while you prioritize this one thing. But as you have young kids, that may shift. You may want to lean into your social wealth and your relationship with your family during those years and put other things on the back burner. So what you're actually looking at and like what you actually want your mix to be is going to shift and change. But having an understanding of the big picture as you make those decisions is what allows you to make them with full and clear intention.
Nice. Who else has got a question? Yep, let's go for it.
Do you have any like daily or weekly like questions or journal prompts or reflections that you kind of you work through on a regular basis to kind of keep you focused on these?
Yeah, I wouldn't say weekly, but definitely monthly or quarterly. So I call it a think day at the end of every month. And I basically take 2 hours-ish go somewhere that's outside my normal environment. Because I'm a huge believer that your sort of your headspace is very tied to the environment that you're in. So if you're in like a very familiar place, you're going to think in familiar patterns. So I try to go to a different place. And in the book, I have these like 8 question prompts that I kind of like to go through or think on during that. So you can go through some of the deeper ones. One of my favorite ones to think about is this idea of the 2 types of priorities you have in life. You have the priorities that you say you have, and then there are the priorities that your actions show you have. And for a lot of us, there's a big gap between the 2. And so if a third party were to come in and observe you for a week, what would they say your priorities are? What would they say on the basis of your actions that you're actually prioritizing, and how aligned or misaligned is that with what you would say they are? I find that that helps a lot with kind of recentering around the things that matter.
You mentioned going into different environments to get a different perspective. Give us a sample of some of the places you'd recommend.
Yeah, I mean, a different coffee shop that you're not used to going to. I love white noise. Like I just like kind of idle noise. It helps me think. And so coffee shops are great for that, and free, obviously. If you're feeling ambitious and you want to go do like a 4 or 8 hour kind of think day, go rent an Airbnb or some like little place that you can get out of your normal zone. I'm a big believer in like walks in nature. So I've done this where I've done like a little personal solo retreat at the end of the year, and gone and done kind of a personal annual review, which I also walk through in the book, or like gone to a cabin for a day, gone like full walled in Thoreau.
Nice. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you so much. It's absolutely amazing session, and I just want to say quickly to Daniel, I go to your various events, free ones, and I've learned so much. It's unbelievable. So thank you for that. I do have a question. It's wonderful, and it's so inspirational, and it's completely fantastic, and I'm going to talk to my son about it. I think he needs to learn from you. So you've got these 5 wealth things, and I just want to ask a question which is straightforward, but it's complicated as well. In terms of spiritual wealth, where does it sit? Would it be in the mental wealth? And also, I know that kind of like a sub-question. Do you meditate? Do you do any of this stuff? Or do you meditate when you run? Or
Yeah. Spiritual wealth is probably the most common question that I get. Where does it sit? It's in both mental and social wealth. In the book, it's contemplated. And in the context of mental wealth, the reason I sort of bucket it in there is because I think that spiritual practice is probably the single most important way that people create that space in their life that I talked about, to wrestle with those big unanswerable questions, those things that we can't possibly answer. It creates that space necessary to do that, and it provides a lot of people with a deep sense of purpose in their journey and in their life. The social wealth aspect is that religious institutions are probably the single best way to make friends as adults outside of work. We have lost that. Like in America, there's a very interesting loneliness trend that you're seeing that really maps very closely to the decline of traditional religious institutions in the country. And a lot of people posit that there's a connection between the two, that we're losing this like very thick institution where you had an opportunity to connect with other value-aligned people. And so I actually think that spirituality plays a role in creating relationships and connections in that way too. And so there is a social wealth aspect. Meditation, I am like a walking meditator, if you will. I am totally incapable of sitting and meditating still. I have this debate a lot with a dear friend of mine named Diego. He goes by Young Pueblo on the internet. Some people have probably seen him on Instagram. He's a great writer. He meditates for 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. And I always tell him, like, I have no idea how you do that. He's like, well, I have no idea how you get into freezing cold water at 4 a.m. So we're both in a similar bucket. I've never been able to build a seated meditation practice, but I do sort of technology-free walks every single day, which is just me with my thoughts. And I think it has a similar benefit.
So you mentioned about switching from a monetary like end goal to a life goal, like ideal life. So you're obviously still on this journey. What would you say your end goal in terms of your life goal look like?
I guess I have this in the book, this sort of visualization of thinking about what my ideal day looks like at age 80. And I think that this is a really useful exercise for people to go through because it clarifies what it is that you're actually trying to build towards. And then it forces you to ask yourself whether your actions in the present are actually bearing out that future? Are you actually doing the things that are going to create that future that you want? Because you ask people that question, and my answer is very similar to a lot of people's answers, which is I want to be, surrounded by people that I love, wife, children, grandchildren, friends. I want to be healthy of mind and body. I want to be thinking about interesting things, feeling some sort of purpose and meaning. And I want to be in a nice place, not like on a private jet or on a yacht, but like in a nice place. And then you ask people what they're doing on a daily basis, and most of them are like not doing anything for their health, and they're not investing in their relationship. It's like there's this huge gap to the point of the question earlier of, are your actions revealing your priorities? That is really the end that I am trying to walk towards. It's much more grounded in people than it is in things. I am a big believer that the best journeys and destinations are created by people, not by anything else. And there's that, I forget what the book is called, like Who Not How, maybe. That concept, just as a phrase, really resonates with me. I've never read the book, actually, but the phrase really resonates with me.
Hi, brilliant talk, by the way. I really appreciate it. I had an internal conflict between doing what's energizing and making money. So just as a background, so I'm a junior doctor who likes making YouTube videos, and I was confused whether to
I've met a few of those. Ali is a good friend.
confused between making videos because I find it energizing, and then monetizing later, versus building like a high ticket business which is less energizing, and then making videos later, which would be energizing. All at once.
I think it's very hard to chew glass for long periods of time. What I mean by that is I think it is very difficult to do the thing that you're like dreading doing just because you think it's going to make money. I've tried to do that on several occasions, and I'm pretty good at chewing glass. I can do that, but it always comes crashing down at some point. The other thing that you need to caution against in your own life is needing to monetize every single thing that you love. I mean, we live in this like side hustle era where you're told that like everything that you enjoy, every passion needs to turn into a side hustle. You need to monetize that hobby. And sometimes you monetize your way out of a passion. Like you go and do that. There's experiments around this, the Stanford marker experiment. They gave a bunch of kids markers and they paid some of them that like drawing for the drawings. And then they came back and a bunch of the kids that had loved drawing no longer liked drawing, because they had been incentivized around it. It was no longer intrinsically interesting to them. That happens to tons of people that love making YouTube videos. Oh, some of my biggest YouTuber friends hate making videos now. You see it happening now. Some of the biggest YouTubers are literally leaving YouTube because it becomes a job. And so you're young, like I would try to just lean in more on things that are truly giving you energy. That doesn't mean quitting your job to just like, oh, I'm gonna just burn the boats and go and do this other thing. But you are gonna find that the things that create energy for you are gonna drive the best outcomes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So from someone that didn't come from money, that's extremely money motivated at the minute, I often hear financially successful people talk about how, it's not about the money. Once they've made the money, how important would you say that it is for someone to go through that journey themselves to make the money and then focus on the other stuff, not just when they got a bit more money and then can focus on that?
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't think I will never tell anyone to not make money. Like when you're starting out your career, I think focusing on building a financial foundation is the most important thing you can do. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like very clearly in the early days, money buys happiness. All the science says that. It is just definitively true because it reduces fundamental burdens and stresses. It allows you to provide for the people around you. It creates those basic experiences. It just can't become that it's the only thing once you get through those early years. But in those early years, having that be a season of your life when you are prioritizing that is probably the smartest decision that you can make. The point is that you can't turn off all of the other areas completely. That was what I did. I literally turned them off. I was seeing my family. There was no reason that I was only seeing my parents once a year. That was just me making a mistake that I was viewing these areas of my life as existing on on-off switches. I was turning off the other areas while this one was turned up. The one being turned up was not the problem. It was that the other ones were turned off. Every area of your life exists on a dimmer switch. So the money one can be turned up in your 20s, 30s, 40s as you're coming up this curve, but the other ones cannot be turned off. You still need to do the tiny, daily, basic investments, whether it's making sure you call your parents, making sure you get together with that friend, the tiny investments in your health, those little things, you don't want to shut those off because they will atrophy to the point of no return.
All right, let's do one or two more. Yep.
Thanks for that, Sahil. I was
just wondering, how do you wrestle with sort of going out there and doing something that you love, like this book is like now, and being away from your family?
Great question. I wrestle with this a lot. And where I come out on this is the idea of balance has sort of been hijacked. This concept of balance is one that we have been convinced that you need to have balance in the days. You need to have a perfect balance on a daily basis across your personal life, your family, your health, your work. Like every single day needs to be perfectly balanced. And if you're not in balance like that, you start stressing out. You're like, oh, my life isn't balanced. The reality is that balance is a lot more about seasons versus days. You are going to have seasons of unbalance in your life. Seasons where you just need to lean all in on the thing that you really care about, the thing that you're pushing towards, whether it's the startup that you're trying to build, whether it's the book launch that I'm trying to do, whatever that thing is. You're in a season of unbalance, but there are seasons of balance to come. And that's the important piece. It's having the recognition that you need to be able to zoom out and see that this season of unbalance that I am currently in, I'm away from my family way more than I want to be, is in service of building towards a season of balance. And that I need to actually have that structured in, I need to be aware that that is the future that I'm trying to build towards during this one season.
Very nice. All right, let's get last couple of questions. Guys, there's any ladies who want to ask a question? Yeah, go for it.
How would you measure the ripple effect you would like to create?
Very hard to actually measure the ripple effect. I would say, you can indirectly try to get an understanding of just via the word of mouth that drives sales of a book. The much more important factor, though, is lives actually impacted. And that is inherently unscalable, and it is personal, because it's about the people that actually I'm able to connect with and touch and feel. That's why I say that I want to get out more and actually hear the stories and talk to people. People send me messages now. I tell one in the book of a man who had read a tweet that I wrote, who started going and visiting his mom more often. She got diagnosed with terminal cancer and passed away. And he told me, when he sent me this message that I include in the book, that he got about 6 more visits, like 6 memories were created with his mom prior to her passing away, because of this thing that I wrote on Twitter from my desk sitting at my house. And I was completely blown away by that idea, that you can sit and create something that fundamentally changes someone's life in that way. And I want to spend more time with people that are going and doing things like that, to actually go deeper on it. There's no way to measure that, but it's something that I feel is like substantively so important.
Nice one. Let's go. Last question. I could see you really had a burning question.
I care a lot about social impact, and I'm very keen to see the development of my continent, Africa. So, 2 questions. Have you been there? Do you go there a lot? And what are your thoughts on how we can move the needle with regards to what you're doing in the book in continents that are historically less advantaged?
Yeah. I have spent a decent amount of time in Africa. Mostly, I've been to South Africa several times, and my mom actually spent many years of her childhood in Nairobi, so I've been to East Africa. I would love to go visit Nigeria because there's a big self-development excitement in the country as well. I think that there are a few things I would say here. One, the reframing of what it means to build a wealthy life is an important meta concept for a lot of people, because there are a lot of people out there in the world who feel like they are not doing well on the traditional scoreboard, that I would argue are actually doing much better than they've been led to believe. And there are a lot of people out there in a lot of different cultures that is the case for. The second piece that I would say here is that based on where a country is on its development curve, it may be that building a financial foundation and understanding some of the tenets that I actually talk about in the book around financial wealth is the most important thing at this phase in a development curve in a country. I mean, India is the same way, like growing middle class, but still in the very early days of actually having a real thriving middle class. And so financial wealth, this whole section in the book on that, understanding the basics of that, not buying into the like crazy fancy things that you're told by a bunch of scammers that are trying to sell you different courses or Discord communities on how to make money, and understanding the basics of these things is a really important thing in those early days. The last thing I would say there is that I think that a lot of developing countries have gotten social wealth really, really well. I mean, India, I think, is remarkable on social wealth. I talked about it in the context of my grandmother, and I think a lot of African countries, in my experience with them, have a very similar thing. Like the family unit is very, very important, and that is connected and well together. And so I think it would be an interesting experiment, actually, to do the scorecard stuff in different countries to get a perspective on where people feel like they're lacking across different regions and countries.
Very nice. Now, can we get a selfie with the books? Can I get everyone to hold the books up?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll get a selfie that I can share on my. I'll share this on my Twitter as well.
Oh, there you go.